Welcome to the Messy City Podcast, where we talk with the people who design, plan, build, develop, or even just think about how to create beautiful, successful, and humane cities and towns. Let's learn from each other and create places we truly care about. Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. I really enjoy having developers of all kinds on the program here, and it's always interesting to me to see the contrast in different thinking, different approaches to development, different scales. My most recent episode actually was a guy who does historic rehabs in small towns in rural Kansas. And I love that discussion, but I also love people who have big, bold ideas that they go after and pursue with zeal as well. And I don't know if he'd describe himself that way, but I think we've got a guy today who I would describe that way, who I'm really excited to have on the program, Steve Nygren. Thanks so much, Steve, for joining me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, this is going to be a lot of fun for me, at least. So we came to talk ostensibly about Steve's project called Serenbe outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And before we get into all that, Steve also has a book that's worth talking about. And I actually wrote down the title because I want to make sure I got it right. But it's called Start in Your Own Backyard, Transforming Where We Live with Radical Common Sense. And I have to say right up front, I love that phrase, radical common sense. That is perfectly tailored to appeal to somebody like me. I'd like to first have you talk just a little bit about the journey of writing a book before we talk at all about Serenbe.
Well, as people started becoming interested in what we have done and realizing that it was something that we don't see, it doesn't seem unusual, but yet there aren't many places like it. And so people wanted to know about the journey and kept encouraging me to write a book. And I first started this several years ago, and it would read sort of like a diary. What was the journey that we had? And I realized, well, that's an interesting story, and a few people would be interested in the historical and what led up to this. But the real thing that I would like to communicate is that what led me to just simply be concerned about urban sprawl destroying our what had been a weekend farm and then became our full-time residence as we were raising our kids. And so it was a very selfish approach to I wanted to save our own backyard from urban sprawl, and like many people, you start buying property or start trying to control the outside forces that are actually destroying what you consider your own paradise, your own dwelling area. And I realized I couldn't keep doing that, and that really didn't protect us. And so that led to, a coffee at my neighbor's kitchen table, who had been here for 7-8 generations now. And what did they think? These are the people generally that are forced off of area when the development sprawl starts, washing through an area. And then I'm invited one of the largest landowners over for dinner. And what were their plans? And of course, anyone with a large holdings were planning to develop it at some point. And then that led to, hey, we need to do something. And Ray Anderson, the people who know environment would know Ray, that name. He formed Interface Carpet that brought carpet squares to America. And in the mid-90s, he realized he was one of the environmental polluters through reading Paul Hawken's book. And he became the first U.S. industrialist to put his company on a carbon neutral footprint. And so at dinner one, he had been a friend for years. And at dinner one night, I said, Ray, you know all the smart people. Who could I hire, invite over, learn from on how we could save this area? And Ray invited the Rocky Mountain Institute in. And so that led me to do something very environmentally indifferent. And so I realized what I really wanted to share is those first steps. This wasn't, I never intended to be a developer. I never intended to be environmentalist, although, we composted and we ate local foods. We walked that talk, but I never intended to lead a movement or lead an energy. And all of a sudden you find you're in this place where you do have influence, you can make things happen. And then you all of a sudden somehow realize that responsibility to actually do it for future generations. And so I wrote the book to really sort of tell that story and encourage people rather than complaining or waiting for big governments or big corporations to change your life or what you're worried about, to step into this decision. And it's fine to do it for a very selfish self-interest. That will motivate us, but you never know where it will lead. So begin where you live or where you work or where your influence is. Maybe it's a podcast. Who's your audience? Should you join the school board, organize your neighborhood? What are the issues that you see as a problem, and step into that conversation. So that was the real reason for the book, is to share my journey, and then to inspire others, and then to give sort of a roadmap. So you'll see in the book we've put QR codes, so you can if you want to do a deep dive in any of the things, whether it's the research or see a lot of our pictures in color, or whatever you want to do. You could actually do a deep dive. It could be a manual for an HOA. It can be a reference for a class. We tried to do it so it really had broad appeal.
I love that, because I think there's a lot of people who feel like they don't have agency, or they've lost an understanding of having agency, not just maybe in their own individual life, but in some larger problem that they think is a problem, whether it's their community or whatever it is. And in fact, I did a whole riff one time on the word they, and just like there's always this mysterious they out there, that they do this or they do that. And I was like, well, who is they? Who actually, there are human beings behind all that. So I really appreciate what you're saying. I wonder if you could also just talk for a minute about what do you mean by radical common sense?
Well, when you actually stop to analyze everything we've done, it's very common sense. We've put front porches on most of our houses, which connects people to people on the street. It's no different than we lived and developed places 80 years ago. We've just stepped away from it, and so. I think during COVID, it really showed the common sense approach to what we've done, because we did not feel deprived. We had even in the most shut down periods, because of the way we built the community, people were walking on the sidewalks, on the streets, and yet you were at a safe distance to wave to and talk to people on their front porches. Kids that were online in school now could be on the front porch, and their friends could come by and talk to them and wave. And it was just a whole spirit of connectivity. And that's what happens every day. We don't allow lawns. If you have a lawn, it takes 30% of our nation's potable water to keep that lawn green. To keep it healthy and weed-free, you generally have to have chemicals. Chemicals then destroy the natural predators, so then you're turning around and spraying it for mosquitoes and all those bugs. And suddenly we're living with a chemical area around our houses where we live and play. And we wonder why we have asthma and cancer and these things. Well, it's common sense if you really look at the issues. We shouldn't be putting chemicals where we live. Uh, we require geothermal heating and air. Granted, it reduces your HVAC costs by 50%, but the real reason is the noise level. Now, we love to have our outside, but then we put these noisy pieces of equipment in, and in spring and fall, when we really love the weather's perfect to be outside, we have this noise factor that we just kind of forget about. And we have even forgotten what nature sounds like because we have all the noises from our lifestyle conveniences. And so when you start just really looking at a lot of these things, it's common sense that it's disturbing our current state of living. And every trend you see, we're unhealthier and more unhappy each decade than we were the decade before. And why aren't more people asking questions? Why do we have an obesity issue? Why are our kids unhappy? Why are antidepressant sales increasing every decade? I think there are common sense solutions to this in our built environment.
Yeah. A lot of what you're talking about is almost a very human connection to the outside world and the human connection to nature that I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that even in big cities historically, there was probably a better connection to nature. Cities were more compact, but it's a fascinating point you mentioned just about the noise level. I've thought about that a lot. But, the pre-air conditioning city would have been quite a bit quieter in many respects.
That's right. That's right. Totally.
And even before the automobile, I mean, I often think about like most of the noise in our neighborhoods right now is vehicles.
It's a convenience of one sort or another. It's vehicles. It's all the air conditionings. It just destroys the quality of our life.
Yeah. So let's give the audience a little bit of background on what Serenbe is and where it is. And I know how I would describe it, and I've visited it a couple of times. And how would you describe it to people who are not familiar today?
Well, it reminds you of a European village from 100 years ago. Very, very much we modeled it like the countryside of England today, to where, and if you look at villages in, across America, especially New England, but everywhere from 100 years ago, they were clustered, dense villages where you could walk, connect fairly naturally with your neighbors. And it was connected immediately to farms or forests or nature. So you had that immediate relationship both with nature and the farmers and the people that were working the land. And so Serenbe basically is a throwback to that period that we have moved the density to 30% of everything that is developed and saving 70% of the land for agriculture, recreation, or forestry or equestrian. And so it would very much remind you of a European village in the shopkeepers we have in the live works and just the way the community functions. And we should state that when I started, I realized that a lot of models, a lot of really great things that have happened, whether it's Seaside, Florida, or Prairie Crossing outside Chicago, they actually attract traditional development to their edges rather than changing the area. And so we realized early on that this needed to be regulated, and we brought 500 landowners together in a 2-year process, a whole story there, to come in with a common vision of that European lifestyle, to where we don't worry about the land until someone wants to develop it. And then there are rules that require you to save 70% of it. It's the only thing like it in the United States that actually does this. You really see the difference. It's 25 years ago, everyone thought we were nuts. They didn't think we could get it through. But we were able to really bring our landowners of speculators of every size together to look at the options and a plan that could bring them more economic value and quality of life value. So no matter where you were on the spectrum of what you wanted to happen to the land, we were able to address their wishes and more so than they had even planned. And now, 25 years later, all of a sudden, in the conversation is nature-forward development, biophilic development, the importance of nature, the importance of connectivity. And so we were just 20, 25 years ahead of a movement that I think is just now starting to sweep America.
So those 500 owners or so, what is the size of that land area that then you were able to impact?
It's 60 square miles for 40,000 acres.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. There's nothing like it that I can even remotely think of.
No, there isn't. And so we're a city, and we broke ground on Serenbe, and we passed the zoning regulations in 2002, state law for transfer development rights in 2003, which is a whole other subject, and then broke ground on Serenbe in 2004. And then we became a city in 2007. So the 40,000 acres was initially an overlay zoning in unincorporated Fulton County. And now we are our own city within the state of Georgia.
Wow. So, if I took a step back for a minute, like you mentioned, you didn't set out to be a developer. I know you had like a whole life and a career before you even took on this project. How did you come to doing this?
Well, I was a restaurateur, and I've been opening restaurants around the country, and we were bringing what was called the American cuisine. 50 years ago we were bringing fresh food in a casual atmosphere, but with a lot of the trappings of fine dining with linen and flowers, what have you. And then in 1991, in the midst of this great success, big house in the city, pool, all those things, we had read about a historic farm for sale southwest of Atlanta. So this is sort of the if anyone who knows or can visualize metropolitan Atlanta, this would be sort of the southwest section between the 7 and 8, if you will, on the face of a clock. And there were no roads here. No one really had any vision of it. It was all the development was going in other ways. And so it was sort of the forgotten area during the whole development decades of Metro Atlanta. And we had certainly never driven out to this area, and I couldn't believe there was really open land. And so we called to clarify that I wasn't interested in buying anything, but I was curious about the open land. And we had darling daughters, 3, 5, and 7. And if they had farm animals, we'd love to stop in and show the kids the animals. And of course, anyone with something for sale says, come on. We arrived, they had the Shetland pony saddled, and we bought the farm.
Oh, that's great. It's making me laugh because I can see that same thing happen to myself in short order. I've got 2 young girls as well, so I feel like this could be in my future. 8 and 10. So
so you understand. They start batting their eyes and saying, "Oh, this is wonderful. You just want to do something you can make it happen," and I could, and I rationalized it would be a good investment to land this close, and so we rented the historic house out because we certainly didn't need that house, and my wife fixed the shack in the back in case we ever wanted to spend the night. I thought we'd come down, a couple Saturday afternoons a month. and maybe we'd get our own Shetland pony and what have you. And as it turns out, it's where the whole family wanted to come every weekend.
Hmm.
And we had a great house in the city, the pool, the big Barbie room. We had battery-operated Barbie cars. I mean, it was everything, that you could buy for those little girls to bring delight to their face. And they wanted to come to the shack where there were no toys except a puzzle for rainy days. And doing that every weekend for 3 years was my value shift. Gosh, what really is important? This treadmill that I had measured as success in both professionally. I was on a lot of civic boards, a lot of, the social boards, dressing up and going to a lot of parties to raise money for this and that. And I thought, what difference are we really making? And the politicians I was supporting weren't necessarily getting elected. And one Monday morning, I had an opportunity to sell the company, and we decided to sell the house and resign from the boards and move to the country. And so we started restoring that country, that historic house, and moved into there in 1994.
How old were the kids when you sold the house and moved?
When we actually moved out, they were 6, 8, and 10.
All right. So you basically raised most of their life out there and out on the
They
farm.
were all raised here, basically. I mean, this is, it was the weekend for 3 years and then full time. And so this is what they know in growing up. And they all went off, encouraged them. They all, one went to Cornell and the other two to University of Colorado. But I'm happy to report they've all brought their northern husbands home. And all 7 grandkids are being raised on the streets of Serenbe. I get to see them every day.
Oh, my. Well, that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. So, all right. So at what point then in this journey did you start to become interested or find out about these fields like new urbanism and, alternative methods of developing real estate? How did you come upon that, and why did that strike you?
Well, Seaside is only 4.5-hour drive. And so we started going to Seaside when the kids were small too. So, we really, there's your foundation of what we think of as new urbanism. And knew Andres Dewani and Robert Davis and everyone. So I saw that grow. And then in my retirement years, we'd go to, we had a friend in a little town southwest of London near, on the way to Bath. And so I learned a lot about the English village system, which actually is old urbanism. So you look at the old villages and whether it's new. So I knew density and walkability was something. But then, this effort was not to develop, it was about to preserve. And so, our initial thing was preserving the majority of the land. And Urban Land Institute had a book that came out, I think, around 2007 with the 10 top environmental communities in the United States. We were the only one with density. It was like Braves Island and, Robert Marvin, who we also worked with, had done several of them. And then, having grown up on a Colorado farm, I knew that putting a farm in would be important. Now, that was crazy back then, too. Everyone had the idea that no one wanted to live next to a farm because they were stinky. Well, industrial farms are, but organic farms aren't. So we put that farm in. Kevin Sachs with New York Times did a story on it, called it an agrihood in the early days. And so we were really one of the leaders in the agrihood movement for development. And so we were just busy doing. But then as we were coming out of the recession, more and more of the analysts started looking at walkable communities and environmental communities were the first to step out of the recession. And so suddenly there was interest in people coming. And some came to see new urbanists, and others came to see environmental, and others from. So I said, "Oh my goodness, we are those things, but we're yet a different version of it. New urbanism isn't always environmental, and so on. And so that's when we really looked at the tag. biophilic design. And so we're really applying biophilic design on a community basis that incorporates new urbanism, agriculture, conservation, all those things within one umbrella.
So what are some of the basic stats as they stand kind of now about Serenbe? Like how many people are living there? How many stores, that sort of thing? How would you describe the rough numbers of the community?
So we have about, we're approaching 1,400 people now live here. And to clarify, one of the biggest things between development and placemakers, we see ourselves as a placemaker building a town, which attracts people from outside our community to support the services within the community so that they're all walkable for our residents, but thrives in it. So at this point, we have 5 restaurants. We have 5 places you can get cappuccino. We have the general store, a bookstore. We have all sort, art gallery. We have 27 folks that would consider themselves health providers. And so that's anywhere from the traditional docs who have left the traditional system to set up their own family practice and pediatrician, to the dentist, to the physical therapist you would find in traditional, all the way to folks doing, oxygen therapy and cryovac, all sorts of the alternate chiropractors, healers in various areas. We have that. What turns out to be, they didn't know it at the time, and we certainly didn't, the nation's first chemical-free pharmacy. So design stores with furniture. I mean, it's a full range. What's really brought a vibrant retail is we have maybe 30, 35 what we call live works. So I don't know if everyone's familiar. It was a common term 1930 before it disappeared from our zoning. But that's where you have a commercial shop on the street and residences above. And so we have this 30 plus of these. And so you have all sorts of people buying these buildings, and they're either operating the business or curating the business. And that just brings a whole vitality, and you really feel it as a village versus a development.
Yeah. And then you also have the working farm still on site.
We have the working farm on site. And then what's really exciting to me too is because we have the 40,000 acres, we have other people who are now starting to farm, and boutique farms and what we call homesteaders, people maybe stepping off the corporate treadmill. At least one member of the family is. And so we have these farms anywhere that, growing animals for protein to vegetables to fruits. And so there's a whole agrarian economy that's happening in the greater area, which is just incredible. It's another thing that's disappeared over the last several decades.
So this is going to take me on a tangent, but I can't help myself. But how plugged in are you to the world of regenerative agriculture?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the guy I'm going to forget his name. There's the farmer in Southwest Georgia who's become quite famous.
You're thinking of Will Harris?
Will Harris, yeah.
Will Harris is a dear friend. In fact, the first time they tested putting protein in a CSA program, he did it with us.
Really?
And so, yeah, no, I know Will. He's a great hero and legend that shows, doing good can pay for itself. And he's totally revitalized a rural county that was losing population and housing and economy. And this shows what Will Harris is doing, what we're doing, is showing how small town America can come back. And, there's just, it's a shame what's happened in rural America. And this is a model on how this can be restored and come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I really appreciate, there's so many things about his work, obviously, but one that often goes unnoticed is how he's repopulated that town and economy because of the human population needed to do the work that they're doing.
That's right.
And
It's,
so
it,
there must
it's a
have been,
great story. And there's a documentary on him. So if anyone does not know about Will Harris, look that up.
So there must have been some cross-pollination between the two of you then and the different things that you were trying to achieve?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we both, of course, started independently, not knowing each other, but these kind of things draw you into one another.
Yeah. Does he or any of his people help mentor some of the people trying to farm in your community?
Well, we're just far enough away that there's not that daily relationship. But we have. Are you familiar with the Rodale Institute out of Pennsylvania?
Mm-hmm.
The foundation. So they have put their Southeast Research Center on my neighbor's land to our immediate north, and so that's a great resource.
Yeah.
We also are now working with the Conservation Fund on their Farms Fund. I don't know how familiar they launched that in Georgia, partly because of what we were doing, and that's to save farmland that's threatened in urban areas. They launched that in Georgia and then Illinois, and I think they headed to North Carolina. So they're rolling this out state by state, and so this really buys threatened farmland that's for sale that might go to development or other uses, and put a conservation easement on it, and then find a farmer who does not necessarily have a path to ownership. There, to make sure that women, military veterans, and people of color are considered to really give them a path. If they've met their business plan in 5 years, then they get a low interest mortgage to where they can own that. If they stop farming, it has to come back into the program. We have just we're working on the fourth farm that's right near Serenbe with them. They've now saved 1,000 acres in Georgia, and so this is putting farms on that. Our city now is through our conservancy is going to be hiring what you would think of as an ag coordinator or a ag commissioner, if you will, for the city to start putting these together so that people that are growing food don't have to be the packagers, distributors, and marketers. They can connect the contracts to the restaurants, both here and in the metro city. And so we're really trying to reestablish the entire agrarian economy, not just farms and farmers on the land, but entire local agrarian economy.
Yeah.
We should all know who's growing our food and what fresh food tastes like.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't happen. And it's one of the most critical things. For the first time in civilization, we have obesity and malnutrition in the same body.
Yeah.
Now, just think about that a minute. How can that be? And so much of what we're packaging of food really isn't nutritious. And we just have to, as a society, start really facing the facts there.
And so what are some of what were you able to grow, or what are you growing on site then?
Oh gosh, I mean, all your vegetables are bringing back, all kinds of lettuces that have disappeared from the food system, and it's not just the farms, and we have brought it into the community. So all of our crosswalks have blueberry bushes, and part of our landscaping are banks of figs and nut trees and apple trees. And so, we've really incorporated a lot of these things into our natural landscape, and the kids here know what fresh food tastes like, and it's a real difference. Our farm does. Oh gosh, we have tomatoes a long period of the year because they have hoop houses for the cold weather. So, most of all kinds of your vegetables and all kinds of kales and greens and all that kind of thing. Is all there. Then farms around us are raising free range chickens and sheep and cattle, and so it's really an entire local agrarian economy that your whole diet, and people are learning to can. And what do you do to get you through the winter months that, as we used to? And people are having a great time. We're having, great people pickling and canning and pepper sauces and it's all things that really it brings pride and fun, and that idea of growing things and then packaging it in some way, sharing it with neighbors. It brings a spirit that we don't find everywhere. And you literally, when you're walking the streets of Serenbe, people ask how everybody's so happy. It's just connecting with our land and with each other.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely that very human touch with all those things that we just lack in so many places. If I went back to the early years and asked you about the real estate development side of things, undertaking a master plan community like this is not an easy task. That's not for the faint of heart. How did you just think about how you got started initially? Like, what were some of the things, and what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome in the early years?
Well, because in my restaurants, I always went into, because I could afford only the real estate, either to lease it and then eventually to buy it in areas that were not obvious. They were transforming areas. So many times I had a seat at the table on redeveloping areas, whether it was the various towns that were coming back around Metro Atlanta. We were Stanley Marcus brought us into Washington, D.C. with our first restaurant in Mazda Galleria. But then when the Pennsylvania Development Authority was redoing the Pennsylvania Avenue between the White House and Capitol, we were one of the 5 restaurants that came in. So we had our seat at many of these people where we could watch developers and see some of the decisions in the process. So it wasn't a foreign language to me, but I had certainly never taken it on myself. When we started looking at this, all the professionals thought I was nuts because there were so many regulations that would not allow that. So many of the financial community wouldn't allow this. And they just sort of laughed at me. And I didn't need to hire people that didn't understand this. Luckily, so I turned to the universities who were really, willing to look at the way things should be rather than the way we have been doing things. And so I strictly worked with universities, both in organizing our zoning and the land plan for Serenbe. And then we started, you hire the civil engineers, we have, our sewer systems, our water systems. You do a deep dive in actually the utilities. But that group from Rocky Mountain Institute I mentioned, that were all professionals in the various areas, they were delighted that someone was going to apply all this to the natural environment. And so they were all great consultants who have never charged me a dime. Right. So between that and working with university classes, we just moved forward in a non-traditional way. Because we had this overlay with the county, we totally redid the zoning. So we were able to put a lot of this in. 50% of what you see at Serenbe really wasn't allowed when we started. So we changed zoning, asked for variances, or broke the law if we had to do what we felt was the right thing, and challenged everyone to challenge us. And this is where you look at common sense. When the rules and regulations, people had a hard time defending the results they were getting when we looked at the very common sense solutions that were there. And so we began, and so I started with 40 lots. And I had been convinced that this was going to be a long haul and a crazy idea. But I had, through this process with Ray Anderson, the Rocky Mountain Institute, somewhere along the line, I had stepped through the threshold of passion. At some point, I had to do it. I stopped looking at whether it made any sense financially or anything else. Once I couldn't get any investors or even borrow money for it. And so the first, 40 lots, I believed a lot in Midtown Atlanta in the 70s. I bought land. We changed that zoning in the 80s. And so that land had appreciated to the point that I could leverage it or sell some of it to actually do what we need to do. I decided that we would move out of the old farmhouse where we'd raised the kids. They were getting ready to head to college. And we'd build a townhouse. No one could imagine a townhouse out here in the woods. This was just, Georgia woods. And being a hospitality guy, we would put a restaurant across the street. And oh my God, how's anybody going to find it in the middle of the woods? At least put it on the main street. Well, no, we're creating a place. And my sister-in-law said, well, I'll build a cottage. And a friend, Ross and Harvard, he said, well, I'll build an estate house. So I said, great. Because we had a mix in those 40s to make what we call a transect, a street that has all the feeling. I thought we'll start with these four buildings, and people will start catching on. We'll get the roads in. And so when we had started construction on the roads and everything was in place, I released a note that we had 40 lots, and here was the prices on 20 of them. And it was a mix for some few live works and cottages and townhouses. 48 hours, they were all reserved.
Wow.
I said, wow, the market is hungry for this, even though everybody else thinks it's crazy. And I raised the prices 20% and released the next 20. And within 6 weeks, they were all reserved. So, oh my goodness, we had to hurry up, and I had to get a builder in and attract it. So this was great. So I thought, well, we got to work on the next 40. So it's about 8 months later, I'm finished what we call a plat, so you can actually sell the lots. And so I had wanted to get a builder in to honor all these reservations I had. There was a little line, they said that they had first right of refusal on any future lots. So I notified them that we were bringing these to market, and they had 48 hours to decide if they would like any of them. They took them all. Oh my gosh. Now in 24 hours, I've sold the next section. Oh my gosh, I got to hurry into the next 40. And so the same thing happened. And so I thought, I've got to, there's so much interest, builders wanting to come in. I've got to really borrow money and do a lot of lots. And so I borrowed some money so we could do 120 lots all at once. And I brought those to market at the end of 2007. Not a good time. The 4 builders who had reservations on all those lots, 2 went bankrupt and 2 quit building.
Oh, God.
But luckily, they had only started collectively maybe 12, 15 houses. And so in one case, the bank finished them or what have you. So we sat with those skeletons. But this is why, 2008 was really a rough year. We didn't sell anything in 2009 a little bit. And in 2010, we started walking out. I redefined, we put on the market a 900 square foot house, geothermal, all solar ready. And we started walking out at that point. So we've been quite through a journey. I've learned a lot, but like anything, you start and you do a deep dive and you learn what you need to. But the big thing I think is I was naive enough to ask the questions, and if it didn't make common sense, I asked more questions. And I got to the point I would say, well, show me this in writing. And we find many times that what city councils or governments think is in writing, many times it's not. It's just the way we've been doing it, or that there's a reason. So it was sometimes when you approach something that's new, you're able to step out of a tradition of doing things many times when it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. It also strikes me that your sell 20 lots and then sell 20 and then sell 40 was also a brilliant marketing and a sales strategy as well.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that fascinates me, Steve, is I'll confess that the first time I was headed to visit Serenbe, which must have been around 2012, 13, I had low expectations. And I think that's because somebody who was pretty steeped in the new urbanism world I had been very underwhelmed by other people's approaches to this idea of sort of the rural hamlet, rural community idea. And then when I got there, was immediately blown away by how nice it was and how much better it was than other projects I'd seen like this. So it kind of leads me to think about so you have the development side, you have the sort of the overarching theory of what you're trying to achieve, and you had this familiarity with like English villages. Were there specific villages or places that you had thought of, that you had seen, that you had hoped to emulate? Were there visual precedents in mind that you had for the community?
Well, it was learning a lot. Once I realized I was going to be a developer, I returned to a lot of the places that in my memory were things that I wanted. And this is when I came out and I found that what I'd term developments, places that happen. I came back with very few pictures because there seemed to be a commonality about many of it. I think a lot of our developments today, they have very thick design review standards, but then they allow a fairly narrow profile of what can be built in the design area. And I found places that I really loved that were older, that had really prospered through a century or something. There was a bigger mix of architecture. And so I really studied that and realized that it worked because of what we call placement and massing. Where does that building sit in relationship to the curb? And what is the height of it? And how does the massing of that relate to the neighbors on the street? And so we really focus on the tapestry of the street to make sure that there is there's none that are jumping out necessarily and saying, "Look at me," unless there's a planned punctuation of maybe contemporary architecture or something about it. But it blends into the tapestry and has a purpose in the tapestry. And that's what we found, whether it was intentional or just happened over centuries in places that was the tapestry I looked at. So there isn't one place. We lived in Ansley Park in the middle of Atlanta, which is a great neighborhood, laid out by Olmsted, and the winding streets and great houses and various sizes, and it had some of this, people tearing them down and putting contemporary houses in. I found that if they replaced a traditional house with something much more contemporary, if it occupied the same basic space, it kind of worked in the street. No matter what the architecture was, if it became bigger than the other houses in the street or closer to its street, it suddenly was awkward and didn't flow. And so just understanding a lot of those things was a real the study on what we thought would work. And so we proceeded to do that. I started out in architecture and was seduced into the hospitality industry. And then Rocky Mountain Institute, I was looking for someone who understood the English village in our land planning. And they introduced me to Phil Tabb, who did his doctorate on the English village system and became trained in sacred geometry. And Phil was then head of architecture at Texas A&M. So he was, again, coming from the pure academic and knowledge standpoint without actually having dealt with rules and regulations and public opinions. And so we were able to move forward with our own vision and then let the market decide whether they liked it or not. We weren't responding to any financial partners, and we were changing the regulations to meet what we had to. So we were able to just kind of move forward, and but basically looking back to how we designed 100 years ago.
So one of the things that sticks in my mind a little bit is the question about scalability, of this idea. I'm sure you've had questions like this before, but let's say I'm somebody, Steve, I don't have access to, 40 square miles and I can't get all my neighbors together in the way that you did. but I might have access to 80 acres or 160 acres in a rural area. What advice would you give somebody who says, I really love what you did at Serenbe, and what translates to a smaller scale?
Well, Kevin, it's, and another reason for the book is this isn't about the size of our streets or the fact that we're in a green field or that I was able to buy land and change zoning. It's how we created a place where people naturally connect with one another and with nature. And that can happen on any size piece of property. And we're, and we got this question a lot. We have for the last 15 years once people started understanding. So we formed Nigran Placemaking as a consulting team, and we have a conference every fall. It's 2.5 days. We bring in everyone from, Steve Kober, who was head of planning for Fulton County. He's now in Sarasota, Florida. No matter where he is in the country, he flies in so that people can understand, how do you communicate with your local governments on some of these things when you're doing something different. We bring in our civil engineers. We bring in everyone who's dealing with our environmental things. And we do a whole sessions on land planning. Dr. Tab, when he retired, he now lives here at Serenbe.
Oh, wow.
Our civil engineers live here. Our architects live here. Everybody has kind of moved in. And so they come all and participate in this. And in the 2.5 days, we have traditional kind of sessions that they were out walking the streets. We're eating in the restaurants. Hospitality is a key piece. Art is a huge piece. So we've formed. We have the art farm, and we have a transfer fee that everyone who buys a house, and no matter how many houses they buy, it's 1% transfer fee that's paid. And we're now putting over $1 million a year into arts programming because I realize great places through centuries have always had an art patron, a church. There's someone supporting the arts. And so we have really led with that. And as a result, we really attracted the creative class because you just feel it. It's whether it's the trash cans or the street lights. We really honor artists and craftsmen. And so that's important. Then the agriculture, education, health and wellness. So these are all programming aspects that happen on a natural village scale that re-supports the physical plan of it. So it's just thinking about the things that are important to me, important to my family, and so how could we bring those forward in today's environment? And that wasn't obvious 25 years ago, and this is why I call it common sense. Once I started digging into it, well, this is natural. We didn't have to reinvent something. We just had to look back and pull people forward who still understood these things, whether it was agriculture or art.
So, final question I'll have for you here is: how do you see the next 10 years or beyond for Serenbe? Like, what's next? How does it evolve from?
Oh, let me tell you that. Oh, and I never really finished. Through our consulting now, we're helping people anywhere from 40 acres in Madison, Wisconsin, and to I just got back one of my book signings in Belfield, across from the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park, New York. They never thought we could get some of these things passed, and they're breaking ground. Iowa, I mean, literally all over, several places here in Georgia. Thomaston, the team from Thomaston was here last week. We redesigned 7 acres to have a lot of the principles we were talking about. And it seemed, oh my gosh, how can you make this different? Oh my goodness. The plan we ended up had 3 times the housing they'd hoped to get and twice the green space. And it felt like 4 times the green space when we got through. And so this isn't about size. It's about understanding those 2 principles of the importance of nature and connecting to each other in places where that happens in a natural way. So, I want to make sure we understood that. I don't think I finished answering the last question. So, what did you just ask me now? Remind me.
How do you see the next decade or more for Serenbe? Like, how does it evolve from here?
Well, it's what I'm excited about. What the book does, what Serenbe's doing is we are now that point where people who are interested in asking those questions of, is there a better way? How can we create a place where people are not as sick? We're looking for a third party to actually start qualifying some of the things we know. We have over 300 full-time kids here living at Serenbe, and there's not one reported sign of asthma. Statistically impossible. We have elders who had moved here and before, who are aging now into their 80s and 90s. And their respiratory issues that they've had other places, they do not have here. The obesity problem. One woman taught me that, hey, I gave up diets 10 years ago because then were working and they were controlling my life. And after moving here several months, I borrowed a scales because my clothes were loose. And she says, I just naturally was losing weight because I'm walking. I'm exposed to fresh food without chemical or without preservatives. My lifestyle change. So we know that we have a lab, if you will, that's demonstrating a different way forward on a lot of these issues. And we are that place that developers are coming now. They're bringing their city councils. In some cases, it's the city council bringing developers that they want to bring this into their cities. We're becoming a think tank on regenerative agriculture. Earlier last year, we actually assembled the team. It was 2 years ago now to testify in Congress, and we were. Regenerative agriculture for the first time is in the minutes of the Congress for the Ag Bill. So with all these national organizations and now international, we have two examples of international coming in here in programs with agriculture. The folks Preserve Life, that's out of India. They have just opened a 65,000 square foot greenhouse. They're doing 300 acres under agriculture. They're opening a nutrition center, 20,000 square foot nutrition center. The whole thing's off the grid. If you have a gas car, you can't drive on campus. It's a young man who's really dealing with the rainforest in South America. They have just moved here 3 weeks ago, and they're going to reestablish some of these same programs for the northern hemisphere because some of the loss of forest in our ag land is a lot of the same things. So we're becoming this really global think tank on some of these important issues. And we have two schools that we've stood up, one charter, one private, education outside, rooms that are opening into nature. We're changing a lot of things in the educational factor too. And then what we're doing with health and wellness I was just in DC for the Global Economic Forum, and the president, John Hancock, was talking about, hey, we're the only people in the insurance industry interested in keeping you alive. He said, 95% of our healthcare dollars are going to address your sickness. And there's only 5% that's addressing prevention. And so we are really deep into that conversation. Also on a global, I just got back from the Global Wellness Summit in Dubai. And so we're in that conversation with a lot of people, whether it's Cleveland Clinic and Mayo, that are really starting to address that what's happening now isn't working. So, wow. Who would have ever imagined when I just wanted to save my backyard?
Yeah.
That now we would step into conversations on a global scale on our food systems, our education, and our health.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking that must be incredibly gratifying on a personal level for you to think about where you started and then all the things that you're talking about now.
Well, it shows you the lack of radical common sense. That's all I've led with.
That's right. Steve, I really appreciate you joining me today and this conversation. This was really, it's timely for me in a personal way that maybe I'll share another time, but it's very, very interesting. And I really thank you for sharing your story with us.
So when are you coming back to see us?
That's a good question. The couple of times I visited before, I was living in Savannah, just down the road a little ways. So it was an easy hop over. Now that I'm back in the Midwest in Kansas City, it's a little more challenging. So I've got to figure out a way to get to the Atlanta area again sometime.
Okay, you come back, make sure I'm here, and I'll give you a personal tour.
I mean, the conference that you mentioned sounds intriguing enough that might be that one that I do on purpose. So
that would be great, and it's in the fall. I think we've just posted the dates.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's fun because you not only the material, but the people.
Oh God, yeah.
That are coming and also interested in this, and just the bonding that happens with all the attendants is really fun to watch what happens there as well.
Yeah, that's great. So, well, hopefully we get a few people who sign up for you after listening to this, and others who are interested in following everything you're doing. So
that's great. Yeah, that's Nigrin Placemaking, and you can look at, and you can. There's some places within the Serenbe's webpage at www.serenbe.com that you can find it if you look at the history, and that'll take you to that as well.
Perfect. Steve, thanks very much. I really appreciate the conversation, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. I love it. Thank you.
Take care.